Origins of the ninja. The rise from rebellion born from chaos in medieval Japan. Warfare wasn't just between noble samurai, it was a chaotic, brutal struggle that often tore the country apart. During the 5th-10th century, Japan was gripped by a period called the Sengoku Jidai, the Warring States era. Civil war, betrayal, and power grabs defined the time. While the samurai are remembered as the noble warriors of this era, they weren't the only ones fighting. In the shadows of these feudal conflicts, another class of warrior was born, the ninja. But ninjas weren't noble lords or warriors trained in palaces. They were outsiders, peasants, monks, renegade samurai, and displaced farmers pushed to the margins of society by war. These desperate people didn't fight for glory. They fought to survive. Out of necessity, they developed a new kind of warfare. One that didn't rely on brute strength or flashy swords. Their tactics were stealthy, psychological, and deadly effective. They didn't march into battle, they crept into enemy camps under the cover of night, burned food supplies, assassinated commanders, and vanished like smoke before anyone knew they were there. This was the true beginning of the ninja, not as a myth, but as a reaction to centuries of violent chaos. Aigain Koga, cradle of the ninja. The real strongholds of ninja culture weren't giant castles or bustling cities. They were isolated, mountainous regions. Aigain Koga, located in central Japan. These rugged, hard-to-reach territories were mostly ignored by the major warlords, allowing local clans to develop their own way of life and their own brand of warfare. Without constant interference from the ruling elite, the people of Aigain Koga they didn't have massive armies or endless supplies. What they had were brains, terrain, knowledge, and community unity. They trained themselves to use their environment, caves, forests, streams as tools of survival and defense. These regions eventually became known as the ninja heart. Generations of families passed down skills like espionage, sabotage, escape, and guerrilla warfare. Ninja clans like the Hattori Fujibai and Momoshi emerged as some of the most respected and feared covert operatives in Japan. By the time major warlords realized how powerful the ninja had become, it was already too late. Aigain Koga had trained generations of shadow warriors. Shinobi versus samurai. Opposites or allies. There's a common myth that samurai and ninja were sworn enemies. The reality is far more complex and way more interesting. In truth, samurai often hired ninjas. They didn't always like them, but they respected what they could do. If a daimyo wanted to eliminate a rival without a full-on war, he didn't send a samurai battalion. He sent a ninja. Samurai followed a rigid code of honor called bushido. They were all about loyalty, bravery, and face-to-face combat. Ninjas were the complete opposite. They used deception, disguise, sabotage, and assassination. To the samurai, this was dishonorable, but extremely useful. In fact, many early ninjas were disgraced samurai ronin who had lost their lords, or younger sons with no inheritance. They took their skills and went underground literally and rewrote the rules of war. Ninjas weren't trying to replace the samurai. They were playing a completely different game, one that the samurai had no defense against. War breeds shadows as the Sengoku era dragged on. Warfare evolved. Battles weren't just won on the field, they were decided before swords were ever drawn. Spies, saboteurs, and informants became just as important as soldiers. Ninja clans were ready for this shift. They already specialized in espionage and disruption. As feudal lords realized the value of these shadow warriors, ninja were hired more and more. One lord might use them to assassinate a rival. Another might send them to burn supply lines. Others paid ninja to gather intelligence or spread false rumors to throw enemies off balance. This wasn't just about killing, it was psychological warfare. It was fear. No one knew when or where a ninja might strike. And when they did, there were no witnesses. By the 1500s, ninja had become a critical part of Japan's military landscape, hidden, underestimated, and terrifying. What Hollywood got wrong? Breaking the myths. The ninja in black. A theatrical lie. When most people imagine a ninja, they picture a figure dressed in all black, scaling rooftops under moonlight, with a sword on their back, and throwing stars at the ready. But here's the truth. That image, it was invented by the theater, not by history. In Japan's traditional kabuki theater, stagehands dressed in black to stay hidden while moving props. Playwrights eventually turned this costume into a dramatic reveal, when one of those silent, black-clad invisible crew members would suddenly become an assassin mid-scene. The effect was shocking and thrilling, and audiences loved it. The ninja in black was born, not in battle, but in storytelling. In real life, ninjas didn't want to stand out. They dressed to blend in, not hide in the shadows. That meant wearing farmers' clothes, merchant robes, or even disguises as monks or beggars. The ninja's greatest weapon wasn't their outfit, it was the illusion they created. Vanishing tricks. No smoke bomb needed. Pop culture has convinced us that ninjas could literally disappear. One moment, they're there. The next, poof, gone in a cloud of smoke. But what's the reality behind these dramatic exits? Real ninjas didn't use magic. They used planning, terrain, and psychological manipulation. They would study the layout of a building for days, identifying escape routes and blind spots. They would create distractions, a fire, a scream in the distance, a burst of light to make a clean getaway. As for the smoke bomb, it did exist, but it wasn't a default move. It was risky, smelly, and could give away your position if used poorly. Most ninjas preferred not to be seen at all in the first place. They didn't need to vanish dramatically. They were already invisible before anyone realized they were there. The sword myth, not their main weapon, another big Hollywood myth, that ninjas were sword-wielding warriors who dueled like samurai. In movies, we often see ninjas flipping through the air, clashing katanas on rooftops. But real ninjas almost never relied on swords. At least not in open combat. The katana was too long and too obvious for stealth missions. Instead, ninjas used shorter blades like the Ninja 2, a straight sword designed for utility, not duels. Some historians even question whether the ninjutsu existed at all, or if it was another pop culture invention. What's clear is that ninjas prioritized concealment, speed, and versatility over flashy combat. Their best weapons were often improvised. A knife hidden in a shoe, a bamboo tube filled with poison, or even a sharpened stick. They didn't want to fight, they wanted to finish the job before a fight ever started. Training in the shadows. Real ninjutsu, it was a practical system for survival, rooted in espionage, guerrilla tactics, and outsmarting enemies. Think of it less like kung fu, and more like a blend of military strategy, disguise, and escape planning. Ninjas didn't train to win duels. They trained to complete missions and disappear. Their mindset wasn't fight to the death, but win without being seen. Ninjutsu emphasized adaptability, sneaking past guards, moving silently, climbing walls, surviving in the wilderness, and knowing when to run instead of fight. It was less about honor, more about results, and it worked. Stealth was a science. One of the first things a ninja learned was how to move without being noticed. This wasn't just walking quietly, it was a whole science of movement. Ninjas practiced walking on floorboards without creaking them, breathing silently, and controlling their heartbeat. They memorized sound patterns to blend into their environment. A cricket chirp here, a dog barked there, and knew exactly when to move or freeze. They even timed their footsteps to match thunder or background noise. In urban areas, they would blend into crowds, adopting the local accents, clothing, and mannerisms. A ninja wasn't just stealthy, he was invisible by design. The goal was always the same: get in, get out, and leave no trace. Disguises and deception. Disguise was one of the ninjas' most powerful tools. Unlike the armored samurai, ninjas used their clothing as a weapon. They dressed as merchants, monks, servants, or entertainers, anyone who wouldn't raise suspicion. They mastered the art of role-playing, learning how to speak like a farmer or act like a wandering priest. In cities, they might spend days blending in, gathering intelligence while pretending to be a vendor or scribe. Some even disguised themselves as women or sick beggars, knowing most guards wouldn't risk confrontation. These deceptions were often more effective than any weapon. If a ninja could get close enough to his target without being noticed, the mission was already halfway done. Training the body and the mind, physical fitness was essential. But it wasn't about bulging muscles, it was about endurance, agility, and control. Ninjas trained in climbing trees and cliffs, swimming silently across rivers, and running long distances barefoot. They practiced holding their breath, slowing their pulse, and staying still for hours at a time. Their bodies became tools for infiltration and escape. But just as important was the mental side of ninjas studied human behavior, learned to control their emotions, and trained to resist interrogation or torture. They practiced remaining calm under extreme pressure, whether they were hiding in a crawlspace or escaping from a trap-filled castle. To the ninja, the most dangerous battlefield was often inside the mind. Tools of the shinobi deadly and ingenious, everyday objects turned into weapons. One of the ninjas' greatest strengths was their ability to turn ordinary tools into deadly weapons. Since ninjas often traveled disguised as farmers, monks, or merchants, they could not afford to carry obvious weapons like samurai swords. Instead, they carried tools that blended into everyday life. For example, a simple sickle used for harvesting rice could be sharpened and used in close combat. A walking stick might conceal a hidden blade. Even a rope used to tie bundles could become a strangling tool. These disguised weapons allowed ninjas to remain unnoticed, while staying fully armed. This creativity was not just clever, it was essential. Being caught with a weapon in enemy territory could mean death. But being caught with farming tools that could be explained, that was the genius of the shinobi. Everything could be a weapon if used correctly. Ninjas developed a wide range of custom tools designed for stealth, escape, and sabotage. One of the most iconic was the shuko metal claws worn on the hands. These helped ninjas climb walls or trees, and could also be used in hand-to-hand combat. Another tool was the caltrip, small metal spikes that were thrown on the ground to slow down pursuers. A single misstep onto a caltrip could cripple a foot, giving the ninja time to escape. Ninjas also used smoke bombs, which created sudden cover during a getaway. These bombs did not make the ninja vanish, but they did create enough confusion to break the enemy's line of sight. Each tool served a purpose, not to overpower the enemy, but to outmaneuver them. It may come as a surprise, but ninjas had access to early forms of explosives and fire-based weapons. They used black powder to create distractions, destroy supplies, or set fires inside enemy camps. Some ninjas carried small grenades, made from bamboo tubes filled with flammable powder and iron shavings. Others used fire arrows, or lit fuses to create chaos behind enemy lines. These were not weapons of mass destruction, they were psychological weapons. The sudden burst of fire or sound would throw enemies into panic. A well-timed fire could draw guards away from their posts, or create a diversion that opened an escape route. For the ninja, chaos was a weapon, and fire was one of the fastest ways to create it. Most of the ninja's tools were homemade or crafted in secret. Unlike samurai, who had professional blacksmiths making polished swords, ninjas relied on practicality. Tools were built from cheap, common materials. They were easy to carry, easy to replace, and difficult to trace. Some weapons were even made with poisons, created from natural herbs, insects, or venom. These poisons could be applied to blades, darts, or even food meant for an unsuspecting enemy. Every ninja carried a small kit of survival gear: maps, fire starters, climbing hooks, lockpicks, and sometimes even disguises ready to be swapped at a moment's notice. These tools were not just for attack, they were for surviving alone in enemy territory, sometimes for weeks at a time. The ninja's strength was not in brute force. It was in being prepared for anything. While samurai charged across open fields in formation, ninjas operated in the shadows, and their missions were just as vital. The ninja's true battlefield was not the front lines. It was behind enemy lines, where a single action could change the outcome of an entire campaign. These missions were not about honor or conquest. They were about information, disruption, and fear. A ninja might be sent to burn a rice storehouse, poison a well, or sneak into a warlord's camp to steal documents. Sometimes, the goal was not to kill. It was to confuse, delay, or demoralize. One ninja could do the work of a dozen soldiers by targeting key vulnerabilities. They understood that war was not just about force, it was about timing, strategy, and psychological pressure. Many of Japan's most powerful warlords hired ninja for critical missions. One famous case involved the daimyo Tokugawa Ieyasu, who relied on ninja support during his rise to power. During his escape from a trap set by rival forces, it was a ninja leader named Hattori Hanzo who helped guide him to safety. Hanzo's elite group from the Iga province became legendary for their ability to navigate enemy territory undetected. They served as scouts, spies, and even personal bodyguards. In another case, ninjas were sent into castles at night to set fires from the inside. Enemy troops would wake up in panic, not knowing how the flames had started. In the confusion, the ninja would vanish. These missions may not have been glorious in the samurai sense, but they were high impact, high risk, and highly effective. Assassination was one of the most feared and misunderstood parts of a ninja's job. Contrary to popular belief, ninja did not walk around slaughtering enemies in cold blood. Assassination was a calculated decision, often reserved for high-value targets. These killings were not about revenge or ego. They were tools of strategy. A well-timed assassination could prevent a war, eliminate a key general, or shift the balance of power between clans. Ninjas studied their targets for days, sometimes weeks. They learned their routines, habits, weaknesses, then they struck. Silently, quickly, and without warning. No honor duels, no speeches, just the cold logic of war in its most efficient form. This was not a last resort. For the ninja, it was often the first and final move. Most people think of ninjas as men leaping across rooftops. But history tells a different story. Female ninjas, known as kunoichi, were just as deadly, and often more effective in certain missions. Kunoichi were trained in espionage, disguise, seduction, and silent killing. They could go places men could not. Inside homes, palaces, and the private quarters of rival lords. While samurai guarded the gates and walls, nobody suspected the serving girl pouring tea. That was the power of the kunoichi. They did not just blend in. They were invisible in plain sight. One of the most fascinating real-life figures in ninja history was a woman named Mochizuki. In the 16th century, she founded what was essentially a school for female spies. Under the patronage of warlord Takeda, she recruited orphan girls and trained them in the arts of deception, communication, and assassination. These women became kunoichi, capable of gathering intelligence, seducing targets, or eliminating enemies with deadly precision. Disguised as geishas, entertainers, shrine maidens, and healers, they infiltrated enemy territory without suspicion. Mochizuki's network of female operatives gave her clan a strategic edge few could match. It was not brute force that gave them power. It was access, secrecy, and finesse. Kunoichi missions often involved seduction, but not in the romanticized way movies suggest. This was psychological warfare. By gaining the trust of a target, a kunoichi could gather information, manipulate decisions, or quietly carry out a mission without drawing attention. In some cases, they acted as courtesans or entertainers, using charm and conversation to get close to powerful men. In others, they posed as helpless villagers or loyal servants, waiting for the right moment to strike. Their weapons were not just knives or poison. They used confidence, timing, and perception. To the enemy, they looked harmless. But behind that mask was someone trained to end a war before it began. Despite their skills, kunoichi were often left out of official records. Samurai history, focused on battlefield glory, and female operatives, were intentionally erased from many documents to protect the secrecy of their missions. But their legacy lives on. In oral traditions, clan scrolls, and the whispered legends that surrounded them. Some historians believe female ninjas may have been responsible for some of the most daring and undetected missions in Japanese history. They proved that war was not only fought with swords, and that true power could come from the shadows, no matter who held it. By the early 1600s, Japan began to stabilize under the Tokugawa shogunate, which brought an end to the constant civil wars of the Sengoku period. With peace came strict control. The new government no longer needed the services of spies and assassins operating outside their rule. The ninja, once considered necessary to survival, now became a threat to centralized authority. The shogunate banned unauthorized warriors and tightly monitored any groups that could challenge their control. The ninja were not hunted down in mass executions. Instead, they were quietly pushed into obscurity. Their services were no longer requested. Their skills no longer needed. Their very identity became a liability in a world that now demanded order over chaos. Though diminished, ninja activity did not disappear overnight. Some clans were absorbed into official intelligence networks, serving as informants and bodyguards under the Tokugawa regime. Others returned to rural life, using their survival skills to farm, trade, or teach in secret. There are reports of ninja involvement as late as the mid-1800s, particularly during times of political unrest. Some served as scouts in regional skirmishes. Others continued to pass down their knowledge quietly through family lines. The last known active ninjas may have been used during the Meiji Restoration, when Japan modernized and overthrew the shogunate, but by then, the age of stealth warriors was nearly gone. The shinobi had become a relic of a forgotten battlefield. As the years passed, stories about the ninja grew larger than life. Without regular battles to fight, the tales of their past missions were transformed into legends. Over time, fact blurred with fiction. They were said to disappear in smoke, walk on water, or control minds. These exaggerations were not always malicious. Many were spread through storytelling, theater, and folk tales, which shaped the ninja's image in the popular imagination. As Japan opened up to the world, these myths spread globally. Western writers, filmmakers, and martial arts enthusiasts adopted the ninja story, often without understanding its roots. The real ninja became buried beneath layers of fantasy. By the 20th century, the ninja was no longer just a historical figure. It had become a symbol of stealth, mystery, and power. While the samurai represented honor and tradition, the ninja became the icon of rebellion and hidden strength. Modern martial arts schools began teaching ninja, often reconstructed from fragments of real techniques, stories, and scrolls. Some of these systems were authentic, others were invented or exaggerated, but all of them shared one thing. The ninja spirit had survived. Not as an army, not as assassins, but as an idea, an eternal shadow that still fascinates the world to this day. In the late 20th century, the ninja exploded into pop culture, especially in the West. From the 1980s onward, they became icons of martial arts cinema, appearing in action movies, comic books, and video games. Movies like Enter the Ninja, American Ninja, and the Sho Kosugi film series turned black-clad assassins into box office gold. These films portrayed ninjas as unstoppable superhuman fighters, armed to the teeth, masked, and mysterious. Meanwhile, Western martial artists began incorporating ninja. Some based their training on real historical documents. Others invented techniques entirely. Either way, the public could not get enough of the ninja. It was no longer about history. It was about spectacle. In the 1980s and 1990s, the ninja image evolved yet again. This time for younger audiences. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles took the world by storm, mixing ancient Japanese lore with pizza, skateboards, and wisecracks. These mutated ninja teens introduced millions of kids to the word ninja for the first time. Meanwhile, in Japan, anime and manga kept the myth alive with new energy. Series like Naruto blended traditional ninja themes with modern fantasy and deep character arcs. The ninja was no longer just a killer. He was a hero, a misunderstood outcast, or a gifted warrior on a personal journey. This new portrayal reached a global audience and redefined the ninja for a new generation. Today, the ninja exists in two worlds. One is grounded in history, Iga and Koga clan scrolls, sabotage, and survival. The other is built on pop culture, smoke bombs, anime battles, and rooftop duels. Many martial arts schools still teach forms of ninja. Some stay close to traditional teachings, focusing on stealth and movement. Others embrace the cinematic style, emphasizing flashy techniques and ninja weapons. The real challenge is separating fact from fantasy, but both versions of the ninja have value. The historical ninja teaches us about adaptation and strategy. The pop culture ninja inspires imagination and creativity. In a way, both are true, because the ninja has always lived between worlds. Even though the battles are over, the ninja remains, not as a clan, not as a secret society, but as a timeless symbol of what it means to think differently, act strategically, and survive in the shadows. From the mountains of Iga to the streets of modern Tokyo, from feudal Japan to Hollywood studios, the story of the ninja is one of you. They began as survivors, they became warriors, and now they live on as legends. The ninja may no longer carry kunai or crawl through castles, but their story is far from over. They remind us that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in being seen, but in knowing when to disappear.